Street. Welcome, we're glad everybody could come, and we're going to turn the presentation over to Andy, manager here. And if you have any questions, do you want the questions now or do you want them during the end? At the end. So if you could kind of keep your questions at there and we'll answer them all at the end, that'd be appreciated. So thank you. Andy?
Thank you. Again, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Andrew Schaefer. I'm the manager for Spring Grove Borough. We're here tonight to discuss the borough property at 50 Northeast Street and the feasibility study results that council had initiated. Again, just like Jim said, keep your questions to the end. We'll have a question and answer period. In addition, we will have a short survey of the results that we present tonight so that you can rank them and kind of give feedback to council on what you think the best option is. We'll be passing those out right at the end of the presentation. When you're finished with those, we could just drop them there on that table. We'll collect those later. So just to get started, a little bit of background about why we're here. Originally, council held the first public meeting on May 7th. During that meeting, council informed the public of the ongoing maintenance issues and the growing concerns regarding the property at 50 Northeast Street. During that meeting, we heard from residents, we heard from tenants of the building, and also users, maybe from outside of Spring Grove Borough, of the building. They had a lot of good feedback, but council took all those comments, that feedback, and they initiated a feasibility study with Core Design Group on May 21st. They decided that that was the best interest to gather the most information about the building and then present that to the public, which is what we're doing tonight. The study was to provide an analysis of the existing building by assessing the structural condition of the building, the utility, mechanical systems, ADA compliance, as well as developing a preliminary cost opinion for the necessary upgrades. This study was presented to council at the September 4th, 2018 council meeting during public session. Additional background. Again, going back to that previous meeting we held on May 7th, we want to review some of that information. The borough is and has been responsible for the general building maintenance costs. So the upkeep of the building, on average, we're around $15,000 a year just on upkeep of that building. We know that the rental income received from the tenants is minimal, and it's really not sufficient to carry the utility, the maintenance, and the upkeep, along with providing some kind of surplus balance on the future of the building. We do want everyone to know tonight that we did, after the last meeting, reach out to all the tenants and inform them that we will be renewing the leases through the end of 2019. We want everybody to know that up front. Just to jump into an aerial view of the building, as we're going into the feasibility study, you'll see that we broke sections of the building out. So when we're looking at the building here on the aerial view, this section here is the gym. We have the parking lot off of Pine Avenue. The middle section where the fitness center and youth center is, as well as we'll call it the upper section for this slide, where the church currently is, cafeteria was when it was a school, as well as a lot of the other community organizations. So the next slide shows, for the purpose of this presentation as well as the feasibility study, Core Design divided the building up into three sections. So we have A building, which again is the gym, the Mother's Center, the meeting room. B building, which is the center section, that is again made up of the fitness center, the youth center, bathrooms, and I think a little tots room currently. And then C building, the upper portion. We have the three sections of the building divided up. Feasibility study results, when they came back, they gave basically 4 options. Now, we do have other options, and we will be presenting those options later on. But in the feasibility study, there were 4 main options presented. I'm going to briefly hit on each one. We're going to discuss them in more detail later. Option one is to completely renovate and remodel the existing building in its entirety. So not demolishing anything, keeping the building looking like this, just basically revamping the whole building. Option two would be to demolish B building. Again, that's the center section. We would renovate in its entirety A and C. So you're removing the center section, renovating and remodeling A and C. Option three, again, pretty much similar to option two. We would demolish B building, renovate A, subdivide and sell off building C. And the last option presented in the feasibility study would be to demolish both B and C buildings and renovate A. So again, last option would be to demolish B and C and renovate A. Before we get into looking at those options, we need to make some assumptions on the borough obtaining a general obligation note or a bond issue. The cost to do these improvements would require the borough to obtain some kind of funding, borrowed funding. So we need to assume that any money that the borough borrows will be charged a 3% interest rate. This is based on similar transactions, similar bond issues in York County, as well as money that the borough has borrowed on a short-term basis. The repayment of those borrowed funds would occur over a period of 20 years unless otherwise noted in this presentation. One of the other items would be issuance cost. Just like any time you're borrowing money, there are issuance costs on a bond or general obligation note for the borough. Normally, historically, these average about 2.5%. Again, that number is not factored into the cost you will see tonight. The repayment of the borrowed funds would come from the borough's general fund. General fund is primarily funded through your real estate tax and your earned income taxes. So that's the bulk of the funding that the general fund receives. So basically, in order to fund these options, it would require a tax increase. Any revenue from the space within the building has not been included as an offset to pay back the borrowed funds. The reason we kept that separate was to make sure that's not guaranteed revenue at this point. Through 2019, we hope it is. Going forward, if there's tenants that leave or changes that are made, that revenue is not guaranteed, so we did not include that in the calculations. So option one, again, this is to renovate and remodel the entire building. The entire building would need a new roof, new windows, doors, other miscellaneous exterior improvements including flashing downspouts, gutters, significant mechanical, air conditioning, heating, electrical, and plumbing improvements. New interior finishes, new restroom fit-outs, new doors, new hardware. We would also resurface the parking lot and upgrade some of the exterior landscaping. In addition, there would be major building code improvements with regards to accessibility and means of egress. At just under $3.2 million, this is the largest financial commitment from the taxpayers of the borough. So when we look at the financial impact of option one, again, I just want to make sure that everybody's aware that these are estimated costs. So when we look at that, right under that 3.2 million, these are estimates. They're strong estimates, but any project that the borough takes on of this magnitude must be publicly bid. Because it's publicly bid, we have to incorporate prevailing wage rates, which increases the cost of a project. So when we're looking at those options, we just need to keep in mind that these are strong estimates of where we're at. So again, using those previously mentioned assumptions that we talked about, we can project that under option one, the annual payments that the borough would need to make on a general obligation note or a bond issue would be right around $210,000. So currently, Spring Grove has 868 taxable parcels, and the average assessment of those 868 taxable parcels is $136,000. Again, based on this option, that means that the average increase per parcel would be $241 a year, which is a 37% increase in the tax rate. That would put Spring Grove as the third highest borough in York County for real estate tax. Currently, North York and West York have higher millage rates than what the borough would end up at, which would be 6.5 mils. Okay, so option two, a reminder, this is to demolish building B and renovate A and C. We would replace that center section where B was with additional parking and green space. It's pretty much, again, A and C would be renovated identical to option one. Building A would still remain the gymnasium, and we would have the possibility of putting in 3 separate community rooms to be rented, even without utilizing any of the basement area. We would need a new end wall on building A, which is the current entrance off of Pine Avenue, and building C, which is the upper building, would need a new end wall as well as a reconfigured entrance. Again, pretty high dollar, right under 2.7 million, second largest financial commitment from the residents of the borough, from the taxpayers of the borough. This is a quick rendering of option 2 and what it would look like. Again, removing that center section, providing a new end wall and entrance, covered entrance off the parking lot. You would be able to open up that this is an access from Pine Avenue to East Street. So hopefully improve the parking in that area. Financial impact of option 2, using those assumptions again that we previously mentioned about the borrowed funds, we can estimate that the annual payments would be right around $179,000. That would require a 32% increase in the tax rate, adding $206 to the municipal tax rate for residents, taxpayers of Spring Grove Borough. Again, it would still put the borough at the third highest tax rate in York County for boroughs. So the average municipal real estate tax bill for a parcel assessed at $136,000 would be $866 a year. Option 3, again, very similar to option 2. The main objective of option 3 is to subdivide and sell off building C. There would be no cost to renovate building C. The only thing that we would need to do would put that end wall where building C meets building A. So that would be the only cost really to improve building C. In order to, again, renovate building A, demolish building B, add the end wall to building C, the total cost would be right over $1.2 million. While this is the least expensive option of all the feasibility study options, it does not include what we're saying now is the unknown expense of the subdivision plan and basically creating a new parcel at that point. In addition, we don't have revenue factored in from a potential sale because we don't know what that would look like at this point. So there is the chance that that 1.2 would be increased by the subdivision process but then decreased by a potential sale. Starting with option 3, we decided to break out the repayment schedules between a 20 and 10-year repayment term. The reason why we did that, again, is lower dollar value, and we're hoping to stretch the money out on a 20-year, but when you start looking at the numbers, it makes sense to borrow it on a 10-year. So we can go through those. On a 20-year repayment schedule, the payments out of the general fund would be just over $82,000 a year. So again, using those average parcels in the borough, they would pay an additional $95. That's a 16% increase. It drops the borough tax rate down a little bit. It would be the 5th highest tax rate in York County. On a 10-year repayment schedule, the average parcel would pay an additional $165 a year, which is a 26% increase. That millage increase would be 1.25 mils, taking the average municipal tax bill to $826 annually for a 10-year repayment. The biggest difference here, and I don't know if everybody can see, the interest that is paid back on a 20-year repayment is $407,000. On a 10-year, it's $193,000. So you're saving over $200,000 in interest by paying it back in a 10-year period. But in order to do that, the tax millage must be higher during that 10-year period. So the last option, option 4 in the feasibility study, is to demolish building B and C in their entirety. This basically eliminates the necessary repair costs and long-term maintenance that the borough is currently facing. It does give the capability to utilize that new green space with an optional playground for the community. We talked about tiered theater seating so that you could have an outdoor classroom, outdoor lectures, outdoor movie theater. At the same time, it gives us the ability to still generate rental income off of the rooms, meeting rooms around the gym and the gym itself. The total investment of just under $1.7 million. This is the second least expensive option. And a quick rendering of what that would look like. We would again need a new end wall on building A with an entrance, covered entrance. We would improve building A, just like option 1, renovate and remodel in its entirety, but building B and C would be demolished, and we would add in green space with a ramp off the parking lot between Pine Avenue and East Street. Again, for option 4, we broke out on a 20 and 10-year repayment schedule. Under this option, basically $1.7 million, the annual payments on a 20-year repayment would be $112,000, requiring a 1 mil tax increase. So each parcel in the borough each average taxable parcel would pay an additional $129, which is a 21% increase. On a 10-year repayment schedule, again, realizing that interest expense and how it decreases, the average parcel in Spring Grove would pay an additional $225 a year, which is a millage increase of 1.75, but again, that's the largest increase that we see out of all the options, so that puts the borough 3rd highest in York County for boroughs. Here again, just like the last option, the difference is obviously you're decreasing the term of the loan. You're saving over $290,000 in interest by paying it off in 10 years compared to 20. All right, so we covered the 4 feasibility study options. Next, we want to talk about potential funding options. We realized that the borough would still need to borrow funds to make something like this happen, but we went out and we looked for funding options. Where can we obtain grant funding, any other funding out there that's possible for a project of this type? We're going to go through a couple options of what we found. The first one, Commonwealth Financing Authority, which is referred to as CFA. They have a program called the Greenways, Trails and Recreation Program. It's a maximum grant award of $250,000. So, large amount of money, obviously, but when we're talking about the projects of this magnitude, it would help chip away, but it's not quite significant enough. The next option, the Department of Community and Economic Development, DCED, has a local government capital project loan program. The main problem with this funding source is that it only allows a maximum loan of $100,000 at 2%. So again, pretty small dollar amount when we're looking at the projects of this size. The next option we thought had some potential, but we were able to gather some more information on it. The Department of Recreation and Natural Resources has a community park rehab and development program, requires a 50% grant match. The problem with this is it would only apply to the areas that are currently utilized by Parks and Recreation, and not the areas that they use for any child care. So really what it applies to would be their office space and the gym. Currently their office space is in building C, obviously the gym is building A. So it would be a large chunk that we could use the money for, but not all encompassing of the projects and the options presented in the feasibility study. What we did find as the highest funding option is a program that the Pennsylvania Office of the Budget administers. That's referred to as the Redevelopment Assistance Capital Program. The minimum project amount is $1 million for this type of program. Again, it requires a 50% grant match. The round opens yearly, and they award $125 million each year, a large amount of money that they award. There are, with any grant fund, there are drawbacks. One of the major drawbacks is it's very politically supported, so we would need to make sure that we're reaching out to our legislators, local legislators, and getting their support for this program. Without that, there's really no chance that the borough would receive funding under this program. Multiple applications are probable. What that means is we're probably going to have to apply a few years in a row before obtaining funding under this program. A local York County community applied for this funding 3 years in a row before they were awarded the funding. So obviously, you know, we need to take that into consideration when we're looking at planning for the future of this building. Those were the main funding options that we found. You know, we're trying our best to make sure that we're not pushing anything off and doing the proper research to make sure that if the funds are out there, that we're eligible and able to apply for them. The next option, obviously was not in the feasibility study, but we wanted to present a couple other options tonight to gather feedback. The next option is an absolute sale of the entire property. Now, because the property is borough-owned, it must be publicly bid. So the borough would need to legally advertise for the sale of the property so that anyone could submit a bid. And again, because it's borough-owned property, the borough would need to receive the appraised value or higher of the property. Council has already initiated an appraisal of the property. At this time, because this is a potential option, we're not releasing the value of that property. Obviously, because if someone knew, it would skew the results a little bit. So that is confidential information at this time. But it's really a matter of taking that process and going through it before we know what a potential buyer would be willing to pay. So if the borough were to advertise, receive bids, and they do not meet that appraised value 2 times, we could then enter into a private sales agreement with a potential buyer. This process, we feel, through legal expenses and advertising expenses, would cost the borough around $3,500. Next option would be to demolish the entire building. Using figures that were placed in the feasibility study per square foot of demolition, we calculated it out that the estimated cost for complete demolition of the building would be $425,000. Noting that we would still require a tax increase of 0.25 mils, basically a quarter mil. So the average assessed property in Spring Grove Borough would pay an additional $56 a year if we use a 10-year repayment schedule. What this really does is obviously eliminates the building completely, but it also eliminates any future maintenance costs and concerns that we have for that building and the property. We would then, in the future, obviously we still have that green space. We have the possibility to improve that green space as well as add some much needed municipal parking for the downtown area. Last option that we'd really like to present tonight is maintain everything pretty much the way it is now, status quo. So we would maintain the leases with the tenants. We would provide maintenance to the building, but we know that even with that maintenance, the building is going to remain out of date. The structure deterioration will continue to occur unless we're able to raise those additional funds. And even with those factors in, we believe that we still need a small tax millage increase of 0.25 mils, which would generate about $30,000 annually. And that would be additional improvements to the building as well as basically creating a reserve fund for large projects that will be needed in the near future. So just a quick summary of what we covered so far. Talked a little bit about the background, why we're here, what council's faced with, the public meetings that were held May 7th, meeting tonight. Discussed the 4 options presented in the feasibility study, funding options for those 4 options presented, as well as looking at the complete sale of the property, demolishing the property, and maintaining status quo, maintaining the property as it is now. So the last kind of thing that we just want everyone to know is, while this obviously is a major budget concern, there are other budget concerns that the borough is currently facing. With regards to emergency services, the annual real estate tax that is received on the properties in the borough, that money, 76% of that money is used to fund emergency services. So that remaining 24% is what the borough is really operating on with regards to all the services that we're able to provide. It's not something, I believe, speaking for council, that we know it's needed, so it's a necessity, and that isn't a necessary expense. It's not something that's going to go away, but it's just something to consider when we're looking at the grand scheme of the budget. We also have our own equipment that we provide services with, so trucks and equipment to remove snow, collect leaves, provide maintenance on the grounds, street sweeper. All of that obviously requires upkeep and maintenance. We have a capital reserve program in place, so we're able to budget for those replacements and those upgrades and maintenance of those, but it still, again, creates a draw on the budget. Road repair projects, the last major road repair project was 2015 into 2016. At that time, the borough was, again, able to obtain a general obligation note through Pennsylvania Infrastructure Bank at 1.62%, which was a $500,000 general obligation note. So very low interest rate. We were able to take a large chunk of projects and complete them in 1 year on a 5-year, basically, repayment schedule. So we know that that general obligation note will be repaid within 5 years. We also know that there'll be a lot of street improvement projects that pop up within the next remaining 2.5, 3 years on that loan that we need to plan ahead for. As you've been reading the borough bits and keeping up on the information, you know that the Main Street rehab project is underway. That project will begin in the fall of 2015 and conclude probably in the fall of 2020. It's a very large project from Jackson Street to Church Street, with basically all new curb, all new sidewalk, street lighting, pedestrian improvements, crosswalks, lighting, new trees, yes, to replace the ones that were cut down. The good news on that project is the borough has obtained over $1 million in grant funding for that project. However, there still is a gap between what that project will cost and the grant funding that we've received to date. In addition, just like equipment repairs, we still have upkeep on other buildings that the borough owns, obviously this being one of them, the Public Works Garage, everything, you know, we're all around the same time period when those buildings were constructed, so we need to keep in mind that as they age, the need for improvements will increase. And then any other normal increases, just like everybody always says, everything goes up, so do the costs to the borough, so we need to keep that in line as well. So what are the next steps? Obviously, everyone that came out tonight, we would like your feedback on what you think of the 7 options presented, what the best option is that council should consider. We have cards that we're going to hand out. What we'd like you to do is rank your options, first, second, and third. What council will do then is collect those and weigh the options. We will be at around 7:30 tonight. There'll be a Facebook alert that goes out, as well as a Nixle alert and a post on our website that will include a link to SurveyMonkey, which will include the same questions that are on the card tonight. So anybody that wasn't able to attend tonight will have the option to complete that survey. We plan on, again, collecting those responses and weighing the best options. During that process, we will continue to communicate to the residents, to the property owners and tenants of the building on what the status is and what considerations council is making. If you want to, again, if you want to take a card on your way out, jot down the first, second, and third, and leave it on the table. We'll collect them. We do have copies of the presentation tonight if you'd like to take one with you. In addition, it will be available on our website. So, with that, anybody have any questions? Anything we missed? Okay, if you're asking a question, if you wouldn't mind stating your name and your address just for the record.
My name is Robert Spangler. I'm on the board of the Spring Grove Historical Society. And we know we have another year, but how long will we have to get stuff out of there? I mean, how long would you give us to vacate? In other words, after 2019?
Right. Really, at that point, it would depend on what the feedback is received. If the feedback's received to demolish the building in its entirety, I think we wanna give you as much time as possible. If it's to renovate the building, obviously, we would hope you would stay. So that's kind of a difficult question to answer. I don't know if any council members have, I would think we would wanna give them as much time as possible, but at minimum, let's see here. At minimum, we would hope to give you somewhere around a year's notice.
I mean, you're gonna know what option we're looking at that point, and from there, I mean, there's a lot of things that would have to happen depending on which option it is. And so, you know, once you see that, then we can take a look and try to figure out how much time would be available.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm Bob Senath. I'm not a borough resident, but I'm on the board of Historical Society. Did they give you any details of how to correct the ADA problems? Because I know there's a lot of steps.
Yeah, a lot of what they looked at, were means of egress, in that feasibility study. I believe, in building C and A, they were gonna put a handicapped chairlift in. Other than that, I know we've looked at an elevator for that building before, and it's just entirely too costly.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Kevin Barley, I live on Spring Street in town. You won't say how much the value of the property is currently, but if you put $3 million into it, and all total, the property's worth $2 million when you're done, doesn't make any sense. So maybe it would be good to know what its value is now, that you're adding $3 million to it, and it would be worth something beyond that.
What you're referring to is the sale of the appraised value
Right.
afterwards?
Yeah, what the value, you put $3 million into a car that, when you're done, it's worth $20,000, doesn't make any sense.
I'm not sure on that particular case, we would know what the value would be at this time. I mean, we have to make a judgment. If we put it in there, that it's a long-term investment for the community. And not necessarily the value of the building as it was tried to be sold in an open market at that point, because there's a different value that they would be looking at potentially for the borough, how we feel about it, versus a total resale value on it. And you never know. I mean, it could go up, way up in value, and it could drop too, based on the economy at the time.
Well, if you're a homeowner and you put, I don't know, $1 million into your home, and when you're said and done, it's worth $500,000, it makes no sense. So,
For a home, I would agree, but not always for a public building like a rec center, because there may be more value that's not part of the building to the community. That's all I'm saying, is that, you know, there's a value to the community for the building that's just not the walls and the ceiling and the floor. I think you.
Joyce Oswald, the building itself, I mean, is it even, I don't wanna say fit to be sold, but is it in proper condition that you can even sell it without making improvements to it?
They would be sold as is. But from everything that we've received, we could sell it the way it stands right now.
Bill Kessler, 407 Noxie Trail. First off, Andy, at option 3, I got 1.67 million, you said 1.2.
You're looking at the feasibility study?
Yes.
Yeah, they referred to it in there as 2A. Not, yeah.
But that's a-
Yeah, I just renumbered it for the
next question
presentation.
is, as is, or status quo for the
Mhm.
building. You say it'd still be 0.25%? added to the taxes?
It'd be 0.25 mils, yeah.
I don't understand why. According to this study, if you charge what the current market rate is, you could make an extra $110,000 a year in rent. So why would you have to add,
The feasibility study used the market rate on commercial rentals. Again, these are local organizations that are renting this, that serve the community as well. So you're right, if council were to make that decision to increase the rents, I mean, I think that would double the rents to those organizations.
it increased it by $110,000,
Correct, yeah.
even if you
But-
only go $5.
But would those organizations stay at that rate in that building? Right.
Well, even if you only go $5. My point is, everything that you guys are talking about are gonna cost the people who live in the borough an arm and a leg. Then you add on more sewer and water, just regular taxes you guys are gonna have to put up, like you said, cause everything goes up. I mean, where's it gonna stop? To me, the only thing that makes sense is status quo, and you can make money, and you have money to put back in the building.
Thank you.
Just so you understand too, there is an increase going to the renters, the tenants this year that is fairly substantial. I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of about 10%. So we're not just saying that they've sat there, we're not just letting the tenants go as it is, we're asking them to pay more, but to ask them to pay double in 1 year, I think would be,
I'm not arguing, I'm saying make it $5.
Yeah, I think
All I'm saying is, if you're gonna keep the status quo, at least make the people that rent the place pay market value, or close to it, instead of making us pay to keep the building going.
yeah, right now, the leases say that the rent can't increase more than 20% in a year. Yeah.
And everything you guys talk about is raising our taxes. Come on.
One other question I have, Joyce Strasball again. What are the organizations that are renting? Are they strictly borough organizations, or are they, let's say, community organizations? Because we're totally funding, if they're just community organizations for like all the surrounding areas, that means the borough residents are paying for all that. Wasn't there a stipulation at the beginning that all of the municipalities were gonna participate in the rec commission and then pay fees and things that would help to upkeep this, or am I not remembering right?
Yeah, the agreement was for the organization, not necessarily the building.
Okay,
Yeah.
so the borough always owned the building and maintained the building
Correct.
itself?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Basically, the way it is set up now is the borough owns the building, we lease space to Regional Parks and Rec along with the other tenants. So the borough is responsible for the upkeep of the building, utility costs, cleaning costs, other maintenance costs. But those costs are offset by any rental income that's charged.
Question, Carl Leo, the numbers you gave for each option, is that what we consider the highest it would go? Does it have a contingency? For example, asbestos removal, or could we look at that 3 million and say, oh, we get into construction, it's going to go 4 million?
Yeah, what they factored into as a contingency was 10%. So what you're seeing in there, were the construction costs plus 10% on that 3 point. Now I think they even considered some in there for architectural and engineering fees as well. Obviously though, with any project, things can pop up and there can be change orders, but that is their, highest educated cost at this time.
And the second question I have on that is, where did the funding come from to pay for the study? And approximately what cost, what is the taxpayer?
The feasibility study itself, was 21?
probably like 22,000.
Yeah, it was around $21,000.
Out of which fund?
Out of the general fund.
General fund?
Yes.
No.
No, the,
No,
It's out of the general fund.
but it came out soon?
Yep.
Okay.
Mike Taft, 150 Water Street. My only question is the $50 to $300 annual tax increase, when are we expecting this? And
Really?
Regardless, we're getting a $50 tax increase by the sounds of it.
Really, at this point, it's up to council, to kind of gather the feedback. I think what we hope to is leave the survey open for 30 days, collect those responses, so they wouldn't be making a decision at this point until the start of the new year, at which time the tax rate has already been set.
Elizabeth Stein, I don't live in the borough, but I am part of Rec Parks. When the Rec Parks was originally decided upon and agreed upon, there was a lot of community fundraising, at which point there was a big fund. Prior to this meeting, I was given information that some of that fund had been used for your study. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Now, you just said it was out of the general fund,
That money's held in the general fund.
but they're two separate funds, correct?
No, it's separate account in the general fund.
You know, to make that clear, the community has already paid for that.
Correct. Yeah, it was out of the
Out
general
of
fund.
money that was originally designated to be used for the community center.
For the
and
building.
For the building
Right.
improvements.
Other questions? Okay. If not, again, please take a survey card. If you have additional comments and questions, you can email us, call us. There are copies of presentation back there.
We're gonna take a little, about a 10-minute break, and before we continue the meeting, give you a chance to grab the cards.
Oh, fantasy.